But I understand also how sometimes people get desperate. We often see women, for instance, that have been battered for years, and sometimes they will murder their abuser out of desperation. And I do believe that the brother was subjected to a tremendous amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation.
The Los Angeles District Attorney makes a stunning announcement in a case that has captivated the nation for decades.
I have to tell you that after a very careful review of all the arguments that were made for people on both sides of this equation, I came to a place where I believe that under the law, resentencing is appropriate, and I am going to recommend that to a court tomorrow.
Lyle and Eric Menendez have been behind bars for more than 30 years for murdering their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, in 1989. Now, after decades of living behind bars, the Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascón is making a huge announcement that could pave the way for the brothers to go free.
What that means in this particular case is that we're going to recommend to the court that the life without the possibility of parole be removed and that they will be sentenced for murder, which, because there are two murders involved, that will be 50 years to life. However, because of their age, under the law, since they were under 26 years of age at the time that these crimes occurred, they will be eligible for parole immediately. The teams that have worked in this, on the resentencing side of it, have spent literally probably hundreds of hours by now looking at this case. These cases were originally presented on the habeas side of it, which I'll explain in a moment what that is, last year, and then the request for a prosecutor-initiated resentencing occurred earlier this year. And there have been people in this office working in these cases from the very beginning, as well as many other cases that we have. The reason why I'm here today and why I came in front of all of you about 10 days ago is because there was a more recent documentary about the case that again brought a tremendous amount of public attention. And we know there have been other documentaries, so this is not the first, this is the more recent one. And frankly, our office got flooded with requests for information. And even though this case was already scheduled to be heard in late November, I decided to move this forward because, quite frankly, we did not have enough resources to handle all the requests. And one of the things that I thrive to do in this office is to be very transparent in everything that we do. In this case, we review the prison files. You have to understand that the way the process works, when you're talking about a resentencing under the law, it really focuses not necessarily on what the original crimes were, but it focuses on, has the person been rehabilitated, number one, and number two, can they be released safely into the community? Under that rubric, since I've been in office, we have resentenced over 300 people, including 28 for murder. Only 4 have reoffended. If that was a regular recidivism rate in this country, we would be the safest nation in the world, but we know that it's not. In fact, somewhere between 40 and 50% of the people that go to prison reoffend and get rearrested. And that's why we have so many problems. However, when you look at the case of the Menendez brothers, you see 2 very young people. One was 19 and the other was 21 when they committed this horrible acts. And I want to underline, they were horrible acts. There is no excuse for murder. And I will never imply that what we're doing here is to excuse that behavior. Because even if you get abused, the right path is to call the police, seek help, But I understand also how sometimes people get desperate. We often see women, for instance, that have been battered for years, and sometimes they will murder their abuser out of desperation. And I do believe that the brother was subjected to a tremendous amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation.
Gascón went on to tell reporters the brothers have been on a better path since being in prison.
But they went to prison for life without the possibility of parole, which meant that certainly under the law at that time, they had no hopes of ever getting out. They could have done what many other people do, which is basically said, you know what, I'm here for the rest of my life, so I'm going to do whatever. I'm going to misbehave, I'm going to join gangs, I'm going to live the life of a person. But they never did that. To the contrary, even though they didn't think that they would ever be let free, they engaged in a different journey. A journey of redemption and a journey of rehabilitation. And often the people that begin their journey of rehabilitation and redemption in prison is often very internal. And what they do, and one of our lawyers pointed out this today, is usually the path is people try to further their education, do things for self-improvement, which the brothers have done, by the way. But it's more unique or less usual, I guess, when people not only do that, but they also begin to engage in ways to make life for others better. And in this case, the brothers have been doing so for a very long time. They have been in prison for nearly 35 years. I believe that they have paid their debt to society, and the system provides a vehicle for their case to be reviewed by a parole board, and the parole concurs with my assessment, and it will be their decision. They will be released accordingly. I must underline, however, this case will be filed in court tomorrow. It is very possible that there may be members of this office that will be present in court opposing their resentencing. And they have a right to do so. And we encourage those that disagree with us to speak, and the court is the appropriate place to do it. We certainly feel we're very sure not only that the brothers have rehabilitated and that they will be safe to be reintegrated in our society, but that they have paid their dues, not only for the crimes that they committed, but because of all the other things they have done to improve the lives of so many others. So, again, we will be filing for resentencing tomorrow. We're seeking that they would be sentenced to life with the possibility of parole, as opposed to life without the possibility of parole, which is they currently have. That means that they would have 50 years to life, because there were 2 murders. But because of the age upon which they were convicted, under 26, under current law, that means they're eligible for youthful parole.
Part of the decision of resentencing came down to updated laws, but also discussions of men being sexual abuse victims as well.
I think there is also important to have some introspection today, because I think that often, for cultural reasons, we don't believe victims of sexual assault, whether they're women or whether they're men. We saw in our first trial, which, by the way, they were tried twice. The first trial, and the jury could not come to a conclusion, and in fact, about half of the jury wanted to convict them of manslaughter, which, if that were to have been the case, they would have been off prison a long time ago. And then there was a second trial, and then they were convicted of murder with special circumstances, which led to the life without the possibility of parole. But it's salient to understand that our own implicit and sometimes explicit bias around sexual abuse and sexual assaults often leads us to severe injustices in our community.
But the path for potential freedom won't come easy because while the DA's office made the recommendation, the decision will ultimately be made by a judge. Last year, attorneys for the brothers filed a habeas corpus petition asking the court to reconsider the conviction and sentence in light of new evidence, which includes a sworn statement by former Menudo Band Boy member Roy Rosilio, who alleges Jose Menendez drugged and raped him in the 80s when he was a teenager. In a hearing next month, the judge is expected to hear that evidence, as well as evidence of a letter that the brothers' attorneys have argued corroborates Eric's allegations he was sexually abused by his father. According to the defense petition, the letter was written by Eric to his cousin Andy Cano in December of '88, just months before Kitty and Jose were murdered. And the defense argues, had the letter been introduced as evidence during the '96 trial, the jury may have reached a different conclusion. But the letter has been called into question for its authenticity. According to court documents filed by Kathleen Cady, an attorney for Kitty Menendez's brother and Eric and Lyle's uncle, although Eric and his cousin Andy Cano both testified about the alleged sexual abuse, neither mentioned anything about Eric writing Cano a letter that referenced the abuse. The court document went on to state, quote, "While we certainly hope that the DA's office has undertaken an analysis of the letter, it is much more likely that the letter, if written by Eric, was written in the last few years and not before the murders as the defense now suggests." According to the amicus curiae brief, it also points to Lyle telling an attorney and family friend he thought his father might have changed his will, as well as telling witnesses either the Colombian cartel or mafia were responsible for the killings before the brothers came clean. The attorney for the brothers' uncle also pointed to another instance where the brothers asked one witness to falsely testify they needed a handgun for protection from their parents. The document also states Lyle asked another witness to testify she was raped by his father. And that witness said if money appeared in her account, she would tell the police. But during Thursday's press conference, family members of both Kitty and Jose Menendez supported Lyle and Eric getting out of prison.
Today is a day filled with hope for our family. We are here because District Attorney Gascón has taken a brave and necessary step forward by recommending a resentencing for Lyle and Eric. The DA's decision reflects the truth that was hidden for so long, and I am grateful for his leadership in making this choice. We stand united in our hope and gratitude. Together we can make sure that Eric and Lyle receive the justice they deserve and finally come home. Thank you to District Attorney George Gascón for his courage and leadership. This step gives us all hope that the truth will finally be heard and that Lyle and Eric can begin to heal from the trauma of their past.
We are here today because District Attorney Gascón has taken a brave and compassionate step forward by recommending resentencing for my cousins Eric and Lyle. And we wish to offer our deepest gratitude to DA Gascón. This decision is not just a legal matter. It is a recognition of the abuse my cousins endured, and we are grateful for the DA's leadership in putting justice over politics. We know this wasn't an easy decision, but it is the right one. This is about truth, justice, and healing. It is time for Lyle and Eric to come home. And I ask all of you to join us in this fight for justice. We stand united in our hope and in our gratitude. Together we can make sure that Eric and Lyle receive the justice they deserve and finally come home. Thank you again to District Attorney George Gascón for his courage and leadership. This step gives us all hope that truth will finally be heard and Eric and Lyle can begin to heal from the horrors of their past. We hope this will also shed light and increase awareness and help others who have been victimized by sexual violence. Thank you all so much for being here today. We are grateful for everyone's support.
Lyle and Eric are both serving life without parole sentences in a California prison. Calls to release them from prison have ramped up as the case has been put back in the spotlight on social media apps, including TikTok, and following the release of Netflix's Monsters, the Lyle and Eric Menendez story. Many social media users have called for the brothers to be freed based on the sexual abuse claims. And earlier this month, Los Angeles County District Attorney George Gascón announced his office received a lot of calls since the Netflix series came out.
First of all, I know that this is an area of tremendous interest nationally. We know, especially since the Netflix documentary came out, we're getting a lot of calls. Let me begin by saying, kind of walk you through a simple explanation of the legal issues here. There are two vehicles upon which people that have been convicted of a crime, well, there are many, but the two are a habeas and the other one's a resentencing. They can ask for a review of their conviction. We've gotten petitions for the brothers on both. Under a habeas, basically what someone that was convicted is asking a review of new evidence that had been made available. That had that evidence been available to the court and the jury at the time of the trial, perhaps the outcome may have been different. And then there's a second process, and it's called resentencing under California law, where a prosecutor can evaluate whether someone has been rehabilitated, and based on their actions and the fact that they're not involved in criminal activity inside of the prison, that their sentence could be reevaluated. In this case, again, the Menendez brothers are asking for a review through both of those vehicles. We have not decided on the outcome. We are reviewing the information, but I think it's also important that we recognize that both men and women can be the victims of sexual assault.
Famous names have also come out in support of the Menendez brothers being released. Reality TV star and prison reform advocate Kim Kardashian wrote in a personal essay about the case, saying in part, quote, "Eric and Lyle had no chance of a fair trial against this backdrop. Back then, there were limited resources for victims of sexual abuse, particularly for boys. There were virtually no systems in place to support survivors, and public awareness of the trauma of male sexual abuse was minimal, often clouded by perceived judgments and homophobia. Can anyone honestly deny that the justice system would have treated the Menendez sisters more leniently? Despite overwhelming family testimony acknowledging the abuse Eric and Lyle suffered, the public remains skeptical," end quote. Cooper Koch, who played Eric Menendez on Netflix's Monster series, also said he supported the brothers' release. He told Vanity Fair this month, quote, "I know that I did everything that I could to support them and advocate for them in my performance and portray them as authentically as possible. And if people are criticizing it, I know that I did everything I could." Even Gypsy Rose Blanchard, who was granted parole after pleading guilty to her role in the murder of her mother, said, quote, "I'm an advocate for abuse victims in general, and I'm all about prison reform. So if the case is being reviewed, then hopefully something can be done. Abuse victims need to be advocated for more." As Eric and Lyle are in their 50s and as the whole world watches, the decision can come down to two different options. They can be resentenced and granted parole immediately, or a judge might rule for them to stay in prison for the rest of their lives. And a hearing has been set for November 26. Reporting for Law and Crime, I'm Elizabeth Milner.